A breathless weather, wind blowing dust from the desert towards the city, causing a thick blanket-like cover, blinding the sky, stole joy and all the sunlight away from people. With a slim hope, going against the harsh weather, the nihilists and the enablers, the fighters, banded together and revived the liveliness of the world. Hello, fellow humans. This is a lot of hope. Welcome to this episode of The Living Journey, where we escape and explore life in an alternate universe. And thank you for your support. Now, let's decompress. What did you do? It might be the darkest before dawn, but seeing a pitch black sky, all people could wish for was as small as light peeking through the dust. The dust storm was brought from the bare land from the west of the city by the wind. It used to be a thick forest, but to form, the mayor declared an emergency and opened the forest up for sale. In the beginning, with the surplus revenue from the land sale and the additional income from the wood being harvested and processed, people in the town enjoy the benefit of wealth, with food farmed from the sold and developed farm, reducing the price and the pressure of living. People loved and supported the deforestation. Within years, the rich soil grew a huge amount of crops, fed the city, enriched the city, and spoiled the city. Even the poorest of the poor got a huge boost. First, they got jobs on the deforestation team. Then, the steady farming contract on the land that they had worked on. Although the work was tough and the whole year of work wouldn't be enough to pay for the mayor's monthly gala, they still were incredibly happy with the drastic improvements. So, when it comes to reforestation, they were the most aggravated in society. The dust storm didn't start big. It was initially just a small series of bad weather days that no one but the connected elites predicted. People seeing the sky being covered by the thin layer of dust. Some even started the trend of taking photos of the pink sun. It will only last until Friday, the news broadcast lied. I'm planning on hosting my very own pink sun party with my very own pink sun drink. But the bad weather continued. The dust covered the sun on its path towards the city, blocking out all the daylight, depriving the growth from all the farms under the sky. Obviously, the economical crash followed right after the massive panic in the supermarket and the stock market, and never recovered. Most people were sick of wearing a mask. Not only had it stopped people from chatting and connecting, but also slowly losing the ability to express and feel good. People had certainly gotten tired of not being able to express or communicate amongst their friends, colleagues, and strangers. It was super hard to live with. Some rebellious residents had taken off the mask, and the dust caused infections and caused the fatalities, left the families with punishing medical debt. Later on, a company developed a high-tech mask with the single company that manufactured the mask. The mask became all people's uniform, and a small amount of shareholders got rich and escaped to the paradise. And half of the people supported whatever measure that could make the hellish reality return to the time before the deforestation. In almost every situation, there is always a winner and a loser. But in this situation, there are only losers. Just some of the losers thought they were winning. The respiratory disease and the infections touched everyone in the city, including the mayor, who had declared another emergency, which allowed him to take over fully. The poetic fate was, however much money the mayor and some of the well-connected people made, the punishment of hell arrived earlier than they wanted. The ironic twist was that the greed of humanity consumed whatever the opposition leaders had promised to the desperate people. How did we get here? Some people thought. How did we not notice the warning of the experts? But the truth was, they blared their horns, warned in every way possible. First, it was the agricultural and environmental experts. Millionaires and billionaires declared and dismissed them as some hipsters, not respected and not heard. Funny enough, the root of all problems started with the deeply rooted trees being torn and the food crops weren't designed with the capacity of maintaining the soil from creating a blanket on a perfect storm during the off-season, which catapulted the civilization towards destruction. Since I remembered things, I had thought about why there were things that I wasn't supposed to say. Funny things are, the not supposed to say things carried different levels of punishment, ranging from financial penalties and public spanking to jail and even complete disappearances. I remember the first punishment that I got was because of a curse word in public, either fuck or shit. I think it's shit, because it had always been my favorite word. It's super easy and convenient to fit for every occasion. At the time, I had one single coin in my possession. I was going to set up the second one so I can buy a toy of some sort. It was absolutely a luxury to buy something that you cannot eat or wear. Or, in my parents' words, wasteful. Because it was the price of a bag of rice, enough for the family to eat for a whole week. Oh, I actually remember now. The toy was a kaleidoscope. The only reason that I recalled it was because of my disappointment of not having the opportunity to buy it. Soon after the storm periodically started, the price for the toy rose to 4 coins. Just imagine my disappointment of holding the 2 precious coins that I had saved for maybe a month and was told by the store owner that the toy is now double the price. When I came home, my mother told me that I should contribute to the family because the price of a bag of rice had increased 3 times due to the panic of some rumors from my neighbor who worked on the farm not far outside of the city. They said because of the weather and the dust storm, all the crops at his work might succumb to nothingness. Days later, the whole family of my neighbor disappeared, with their front door being completely broken down. I snuck into the living room and found a free kaleidoscope, almost exactly what I wanted, but in a purple color and slightly worn. I remembered happily running to my mother, showing her my new possession. Normally, she would be extremely happy and encouraging. I didn't realize it was stealing, nor did I realize that the neighbors were kidnapped in the middle of the night by the agents. At the time, my parents didn't say anything, just stayed in silence. thinking about the neighbor, the little girl, on the night before was holding the toy that I was holding on. I felt bad. Being a kid, relying on my parents to do anything and everything, I asked, "What did you do? Did you do anything?" That's when the sky got darker and darker, and every day my nose became more and more irritated, and my eyes watered with tears from the irritants. One day at school, we heard from the teacher that we all should wear masks to prevent the dust from going into our lungs. Wearing masks did help a bit, but it was uncomfortable and I didn't like it. I wished that I was as creative as some of my classmates. Their creativities really shined through the hierarchy of different levels of masks. Some students were wearing disposable surgical masks. Some of the students, like me, wore a normal piece of cloth. And some of them found materials from the thrift shops, cutting up the old clothes and sharing them with people they knew. Normally, the fabrics for masks would be cut up into triangles, but they experimented and invented different shapes and ways to wear them. At the time, I thought that's why they had the best signs during the protest. The protest over inflation grew. My parents thought because of the protest would slow down and fade away. But it was not as hopeful, or the world is just not as naive as they were. The protest consisted of blood spilling in the dusty air, mixed with the desire to hold on to power. It created a sticky oil-like texture gunk that dropped onto the cracked concrete city streets. Days after the violence against the pursuit of a better life, I defied my parents' order and got into the neighborhood that was scattered by bullets. A friend of mine said some building surfaces were like a kind of cheese that they used to have all the time. Swiss cheese, my friend said. I used to hate it. It's funky. But now I miss having it. Not funky like this neighborhood though. It's actually tasty. When I asked my parents if we had Swiss cheese before the dust storm, they realized that I had gone into the forbidden blocks, and they were pissed. My gentle parents yelled at me for the very first time. At least, that's the one that I remember the most, and the most clearly, years later. I guess it really gutted me, to the point that memories of hunger and the hard-to-breathe situation were much less painful. I wish they could understand me and they can thoroughly explain to me how dangerous the neighborhood had turned into. And I wish they were still with me and we could talk about the whole ordeal and the changes that had happened under this beautiful sunlight. No, I didn't move away. The city is slowly recovering after the resistance secretly installed tube-shaped sandbags made from old clothes on the deforested desert land, and with sheer luck, after the desert blew up less sand, the desert grew some drought-resistant plants. I'm not a political expert. I didn't know how it happened, but the movement of destroying the land for profit, which compiled with the insatiable need for power and money, was gradually but surely replaced by empathy and a sense of community. I wasn't a part of the movement. That's why when I was sometimes asked by my colleagues and friends, "What did you do during the rebellion?" I would repeat my lies that I was one of the organizers that helped with finding used clothes and scrap fabrics. Since I learned the story from the underground news publication, people would sometimes be impressed by me and show me admirations that made me blush and feel ashamed. The underground news publication was disguised as the packaging for the government-supported daily nutrition distribution. Paper that wrapped the supercharged food was printed with simple messages by an old manual press. It was a dark time. Not only was the sun barely visible, but also the technology was developed so fast under the stressed time to make life survivable, yet not desirable. For example, the food, the supercharged food. They gave it a name that nobody bothered to memorize. We all just called it by its texture. Slime. It's not a tasty thing, with a mucus-like texture, filled with nutrients that sustained life and fulfilled stomachs. But it tasted like a middly harsh chemical. Comes with two flavors. We call them fake sweet and salty spice. Considering that was the only source of food, we were forced to accept the conditions and payments. My family was fortunate. We didn't have to pay rent, just the mandatory cost of food and the monthly subscription to the high-tech breathing mask. It's actually been a long while since the days people wore insufficient fabric cloth as masks. It became extremely necessary to wear the high-tech mask of full face coverage, air purifying, audio recording, facial monitoring, and point-of-view surveillance camera developed by the company that owned and profited from the deforested farmland. Remember I said there were words that you weren't supposed to say, like criticisms towards the leaderships, the mayor, the whole or part of the government that somehow included the elite class. If you did, you will be fined financially or legally. The mask is a device that's on 24/7. Whoever exists in and around the city needs and will wear them. It will hear what you say, what you see, what your facial expressions looks like, and what you heard. Thank God it didn't have the function to monitor your unspoken thoughts. I heard they had the technology. It was just the mask. Well, let's call it the helmet. It's already too heavy for daily use. For the society to run as smoothly as possible, for normal people to walk normally outside of the house, the leadership and the mayor decided to let the last bit of freedom run loose. Each time I take off my mask when I get home, it is the most relaxed time, like taking off makeup and bras, or drinking a cold beer watching TV. All feel so relaxed and happy. I had no idea what makeup was at the time. Nobody has them, nor could anyone see them through the masks. The only identification outside of the house is the height and weight proportion, plus the scammable ID cards that everybody was forced to wear. I mean, who can blame them? People wearing the same model of uniforms, the same model of masks, and the same model of miseries. Anyways, when I get home, we will all put the mask onto charge all the time, placing them in a well-isolated box for safekeeping, to speak freely with the family without being punished for what we said. And most people choose the fridge or the oven as the insulation box, since nobody cooks or eats non-chemically engineered foods anymore. We will read the underground news brief around the couch, far away from the kitchen. Sometimes the news was brief, as short as the frontline sandbag were destroyed by the corporations, or as long as a 400-word detailed report When I asked my parents why the corporations were so against the effort to reduce the dust storm and make the city more livable, they gave me some ambiguous answers. I couldn't make sense of it. It is only now that I understood how they had been suppressed to their core, that even in the comfort of their own home, they couldn't speak the truth to their own offspring. I'm sure that they were worried about the financial punishment and the eviction from our own home. After all, I had lost 3 friends from 3 different families in my building due to the parents' miscalculation of words. As I grew older, I realized another possibility. Maybe it was because they were scared of me doing radical things that would get me hurt or jailed. The level of protection caused me to not know much about the struggle and the hardships, comparing to others who had an acknowledgement of the history and experienced the rain of bullets. On one of the conversations with my coworkers, I was introduced by one to whom I had told the story of how I helped gather pillowcases from the neighbors to be used as the windproofing sandbags, which was the story that I had read from the brief. I was showered with a round of applause. I begged them to stop, told them it triggered the bad memories of my teammates' ill fate. But the truth was, I picked the story because there were few survivors of the incidents. As the news brief said, most of the fellow humans did not survive the attack. I remembered the cold and restrained wording. The applause reminded me how ashamed I was of the vanity and the guilt of doing nothing at the time. There had been several chances of me doing something though. I was just too scared of it and chickened out. There was a day that's engraved in my mind. I don't know if I will ever forget. My dad asked me to go to my aunt's to pick up a bike that we shared, since he needed to travel about 30 miles into the suburb for some errands. I was happy to be out of the apartment for a bit, seeing the 4 walls of my room for so long every day. It can be so empty and lonely. Hopping off the stairs like I was dancing. By the time I walked through a random block, I heard a muffled voice penetrated my mask, interrupting my favorite music from my dad's collection. He had grown sick of them, but music from other cities was not allowed. I'm jealous of some of my classmates that had gotten hold of the foreign music. I dared not ask how they acquired them, as it is also a punishable offense to know but not report. I'm glad that ratting on others was a thing that I didn't do. Anyways, the voice, muffled female voice, it traveled from her mask through the thick isolation and ventilation mechanics, through the dust-filled air, through my mask-spewing headphones, into my ears. I got curious, turned my head towards the voice. A female, surrounded by the government-sponsored cooperative agents. I could barely see her. If it weren't for the clear color contrast between the agents and the civilian uniforms, I would never be able to recognize her. Got even more curious, toned into the conversation. If you could call the argument a conversation, by turning on the video cam function, focused in on the action and the commotion. I didn't remember much of the dialogues, but I remember the woman said, "Don't forget you are also human," and a loud bang followed the laughter ring. The agent who pulled the trigger said, "Know where you got now? Bitch." I was frozen in place, like many others, some watching from the street next to me. some through their windows. We all did nothing. Just watching the woman laying in the ground as the dust clenched the blood gushing out of her body and mixed with the shock, creating the thick, dark, oil-like texture, slowly soaking into the cracked stray concrete. A door that was just a couple doors down from the scene opened, came out with a taller, mature man and a teen who was roughly my height, screaming, crying, and rushing to pull the woman back into the house. After they pulled the body into the building, before they could close the door, the agents who shot her busted through their safety haven, dragging the presumed father and son duo out of their house and pulled their masks off. The agents held their heads, turned them towards the wind, using their faces as nets to catch the dust. First, I heard the dust splashing on my mask. Then I heard the scream for help. Realizing that nobody is going to help, their voice turned into loud and desperate cursing. Then they both started to choke. I couldn't fathom the actions, why the agents doing what they did, because I know for sure they could just cut off the household food supply. Although cruel, it's not as violent and sadistic. I had tasted dust before. I remember the feeling because it was excruciating, like throwing a bunch of cane sugar or salt into your mouth, but the crystal doesn't melt, and your brain rejects the throat from swallowing, but the wind shoves them down, like a housewife trying to force the overpriced garbage disposal to take all the food waste down the drain. I heard their sound disappeared from the ward, and I looked around, trying to find someone to say or do something, but I found some people had even looked down, pretending that nothing had happened. I don't remember much about the trip to my aunt's, nor do I remember how I got back to my apartment, but I remember I never walked that street, nor did I ever peeked into the street, even if I passed by it. For me, there would always be a puddle of yearning for humanity, soaked into the soil under the concrete pavement, and there will always be a helpless sensation laying in the middle of the road, facing the dusty wind. When I got home that day, I didn't put the mask into the oven. I took it into my room, loaded the video onto my computer, and watched it for the very first time. Then the second time. Then the third time. It was my first in-person experience. I thought I would have gotten used to it when I had seen similar incidents on TV before. They had always dubbed it as a terrorist activity being suppressed. The scene was so familiar and so different from what I had been told. This desperate situation is just impossible to grapple with. Each time I watched the video, I saw the new details. First, it was the coldness of the agent. The laugh made me realize that there would be no consequences to the agent's actions. Second, there was nobody but myself had turned on the video cam mode, as no other mask's camera indicator light was on. Then, when I was going to upload the video online for the world to witness, I saw an agent pointing the heavily gloved two fingers towards his own eyes, then turned around to point at me, gesturing that he could see me recording, combined with the green laser from his mask towards my ID, gesturing that he knew who I was and what I was doing. Hearing the haunting scream of the father's suffocating silence, I abandoned my plan and didn't upload the video at all. I watched the scene from the video that actually was in front of my eyes. I felt detached, almost as if it's a badly scripted and poorly directed horror film. I couldn't find the connection emotionally. I stored the video in a flash drive and buried it in my junk drawer. That day, I was shocked but felt nothing, and I did nothing. So did the justice. Justice did nothing. As much as I searched, I'm pretty sure that nothing had happened to the agents. Till today, sometimes I lay awake at night in my bed, searching for the street name. Similar incidents, stories, no victims' names, no incidents got reported. The three souls just disappeared in the dark dust storm, remains lifeless and nameless, not even a number in the statistics. When the government was about to fall, I had a sense in my gut. It was a combination of resistance managing to reduce sandstorm by planting trees and the makeshift sandbags, and the budgeting system completely collapsing due to the over-corruption, and the lack of income causing the regime supporting agents and the citizen supporters to not be paid. And it doesn't help when the mayor and several leaders perished by the environment that they created that brought them unprecedented power and profit. I heard stories that while people were suffocating from the dust storm, they raised a huge balloon the size of a sports stadium to create a well-insulated, sand-proofing, bright artificial sunlight space. Most of the time they used it for daily walks, but sometimes they used it for parties and events, including the monthly gala. I heard that the most unfortunate things happened there just days after the underground news brief announced that they would crush the party. I never heard any follow-up from the official news, but underground news brief claimed the victory. According to my now colleagues, the rebel disconnected the power from the air filtration system, and the dust quickly overwhelmed the arrogant elites, and most of them never recovered from the trauma, both mentally and physically. I wish I could tell you the new world had become a perfect paradise, but I wouldn't want to lie to you. Since the sunlight returned, the city is still filled with problems, and I had been doing my best to find out who those three people were. The three that perished before my eyes. I had been wondering if I had uploaded the video at the time, would the revolution kick up a notch and make the suffering shorter? Or would the video spread far and wide, causing the foreign aid to arrive faster? I don't know. I just know that I had to find out who they were. Walked to the street block for the first time in over a decade. The neighborhood had not changed much. Standing on the exact spot that I froze in, I looked towards the cracked cement pavement that's now filled with wildflowers, besides some houses that had been demolished, allowing the sunlight to fully shine on my unmasked face. Surprisingly, I didn't or couldn't feel any overwhelming emotions, like I was withdrawn from the world, completely disassociating myself from the history, or the sun shining on the street just contrasted with the dusty dark sky too much, which the dust storm caused me to not be able to see the whole world at all. Not realizing the group of skyscrapers were always right behind the row of houses, the house that hosted the family was no longer there. I walked across street, found a couple of the insects flying around the wildflowers, They flew away right when I arrived, like they were scared of me. As I was standing curiously, I was told by a neighbor who was wearing a loose yellow dress that those insects were bees. She poured some water into the potted plants on her steps. They were gathering nectars and pollen from the wildflowers, revitalizing, populating, and keeping the whole ecosystem going. Staring at the flowers, standing on the exact spot that my endless guilt started. I couldn't move, trying to motivate myself to get the secret out of my chest. But the old woman spoke first. Years ago, when the dark cloud was still looming over us, my neighbor was shot by the agent, right where you are standing. Following her words, I spoke out almost automatically. I know, I was standing right there, pointed towards the spot across the street, not far from the fire hydrant. I recorded the whole incident on video. Got invited into her house. She served me some tea and cookies. It is an old but cozy and clean house. The exterior matches the interior. Warm but loved. I didn't speak much, just told her that I was in the neighborhood for the first time since the incident and wanted to know more about the family. So she told me the stories that she knew. The woman grew up in the neighborhood. The old lady even babysat her when she was a child. She was always rebellious, sarcastic, and unafraid. They will look much nicer if you put the fuller pots on top of the steps. The neighbor recalled the woman's childhood, pointed to the randomly displayed plants on the steps. And I told her that I liked the way I randomly displayed them. But she was right, so the next day, I moved the pots, expecting her to tell me off when she returned home from school. And guess what? She wrote me a note suggesting that I plant some local native flowers. She asked her biology teacher, learned the native flowers will bloom much nicer because of their resilience and adaptation to the weather and the climate. Did you see the cracked pavement? I asked, and she nodded her head. The woman married her husband right out of college and gave birth to the most adorable but equally rebellious and willful boy. The neighbor said, "Oh my God, when I babysat him, he reminded me of his mother when she was a kid. The exact tone of, 'No, this is my house. I want to build my house this way,' referring to the storage boxes that I had laid against the corner, which when he pulled around, making a wall of fortress to himself. 'If you take my wall, my roof will fall down.' She told me that the storage boxes were haunting, but she couldn't get herself to throw them out, so she put them into the corner of her basement with some items that she salvaged from the emptied, then demolished house. The boxes reminded her of the day, his voice, and the hugs that the woman and the boy had ever given her, the crisp and innocent sound, and the persistent yet not so strong arms that you can't nor want to pull apart. I went home that day, feeling a package of emotions replacing my numbed sense towards the reality. The nihilistic point of view towards the injustice and the loss of freedom suddenly all felt so wrong. Like coral reefs, soaked in the constantly warming water, slowly losing the liveliness without ever realizing the fate. The life under the absolute power slowly lost its magic. I don't know why the scent of the flowers from the cracked pavement resided in my brain. I could close my eyes and they would appear around my nose. So when I returned home, finally again, I looked at the video from the years and years ago. The brutal execution finally transcended its sadness through time. The urge to do something overcame the fear. I told the story in front of my camera, attached the video that I recorded on my mask, and told the story of the family, whom I couldn't find any trace of evidence that they existed. I just want people to remember the names, all the small ordinary stories that the neighbor told me, and was robbed by the thugs who probably escaped the punishment. What else can I do besides saying their names? Can I still bear to do nothing? That's all for this episode of The Living Journey. I truly am grateful for your time. Feel free to leave your reviews. Please like, follow, or subscribe. Do share this show so we can grow together. Lots of hope. Signing out.